One. You should be live. Yep.
Driveline R&D podcast, episode 56. This is Alex Caravan, Driveline Baseball Manager of Data Science, drinking a bear mug because Brady hates porters, so someone's got to drink them.
Thank you.
Lindley, sports engineer, Driveline Baseball, drinking a Double Mountain vaporizer, dry hopped pale ale. This one might slap.
And I'm Anthony Brady, Manager of Sports Science, Driveline Baseball, biomechanist, primary host of the Driveline R&D Research and Drinks podcast. No alcohol for me today. Just polishing off the last of this delish strawberry kiss bang. And yeah, episode 56. We got a guest today. Fire guest.
Yeah, we got Rachel Luba. Thanks for joining us. Known as Agent Rachel Luba to some people. Sports agent to the highest paid average salaried player of all time. So, Rachel, great to have you on.
Thanks for having me. Sorry I don't have a drink. Definitely have a real job to do later, so no alcohol for me.
Oh, yeah. Is that a zinger at us?
Jobs. Some of us are more lightweight than others, but point taken. But Rachel, yeah, and for the viewers, by the way, off air, Rachel and I were just talking about possibly competing, Rachel shaving her head too, and then racing back to my previous hair length, see who grows their hair faster.
Yeah, I'm going to keep my hair this length, but you let me know when you get there.
I'm in on that competition.
I mean, my hair grows fast. That's probably what do you think, Brady? 18 months?
I think you're pushing 2 years. I would really hope that you're pushing 2 years. It'd be an insane hair growth rate, if not.
Yeah, Rachel, great to have you on. Like I was saying, you want to? I mean, at this point, you're definitely up there for potentially our most famous guest. You've kind of like burst on the scene. But for anyone that possibly doesn't know who you are, you want to give a little bit of background and how you got yourself in, your current situation and how that's been.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me on. I am a baseball agent, obviously. I'm also an attorney. Was a gymnast at UCLA, decided I wanted to be an agent, was told that I'm not really welcome in the industry because I'm a female. So was pretty motivated to do exactly that and become an agent and be in the industry. Went to law school, became a lawyer, worked as a salary arbitration attorney at the MLBPA, and then ended up starting my own agency. I've known, obviously, you, Caravan, for a while, and the Driveline guys, just because Bauer, his connection with Driveline, and spent a lot of time, especially just in the years leading up to launching my agency, in and around Driveline, and picking the brains of the different people in there. Just to, better understand what you guys are doing and, your guys' approach to baseball.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I remember when I first met you, I wasn't, or at least I don't know if you always had like a really firm outline in your head of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. But at least to me, from my point of view, it was like clearly you're interested in you're exploring different options and hiring different people. And I remember talking about that. So I was gonna say, like, even just stepping back a couple of years, like say like 2-3 years ago, how does your vision from 2 to 3 years ago match up with where you are now?
Yeah, so when I always kind of took the approach, I guess to kind of go back, my the reason that everyone and like agents always told me, well, there were a couple of reasons, but why I wasn't welcome in this industry was, I wasn't going to be a part of, I couldn't fit into this boys club. I didn't play baseball. I couldn't do what they do. And I didn't have the ability to. And, one of the reasons like I kind of loved what Driveline was doing was, if even just looking at Kyle Bodie, he's not a baseball guy. He's an outsider that came in and used, data, numbers, math, all that, and it is able to, now be very successful in the baseball world. So my approach was kind of taking that same methodology and applying it to the agent world. And first of all, I saw that, the agents themselves, it used to be where agents, players had these lawyers, these agents who were much more, they definitely had the advantage over the teams. The front offices tended to be these former players who, maybe weren't, they were baseball guys, but they weren't super, super, super smart. Now, what's happened is, look, the front offices have gotten a lot smarter. They're filled with a bunch of, Ivy League grads and nerds, and I say that in the best way possible.
And our employees that keep poaching too.
Yeah. Exactly. People that formerly worked for us.
Yeah. Well, see, they know where to hire them from, but so they got a lot smarter, and now it's kind of the pendulum swung in the other direction. Now they tend to have the upper hand, and they have much more data that they're working with compared to a lot of the agents. And so not only did I see an inefficiency there, just in the fact that, agents really aren't using data, I think the way that they could in order to help their players. But, they're also, it's a way for me to, okay, I don't have to be buddy with you. Like, data's data. If I understand the numbers, if I can value players, if I can do all these things, there's no reason that I can't, do your job. So that was kind of the idea behind it. And while I taught myself a lot of, advanced analytics and all that kind of stuff, and, really read a lot about it, talked to guys at Driveline about, different stuff that you guys were doing. At the end of the day, I wanted to bring on analysts who could, take the data, who could create different algorithms that help build out things that were much more comparable to what teams have when it comes to valuing players, when it comes to, player development. Not that I would say teams are the most, like ahead of the game in player development necessarily. Right. Yeah. But, they still have tons more data. And so I kind of wanted to build that same sort of thing that could compete with teams, but on the agent side. And I think it's been so far pretty successful. Definitely come a long ways since I remember talking to you first, Caravan, about it. But yeah.
Is that a novel concept or kind of a novel idea as compared to other agencies? Are there, like, do you think that leveraging data and analytics with you and your clients is something it's normal, or is that above and beyond what other agencies do?
I would say that it's not that normal. It's something that, a lot of agencies, I think, say that they use analytics and they, use data, and they know how to go onto fan graphs and other things like this. But, do they have algorithms that can, spit out values of players and predictive values? There might be some. I don't think it's that prevalent though. Also, just because they don't necessarily, the agent side, it's hard to get data, a lot of the data, because a lot of it is not publicly available, like, as I'm sure you guys know. So it's not super prevalent. I think agents in general tend to be more of the mindset too that they've been doing this for so long, they know how to value players. But then on the other hand, they will complain and cry collusion when, their free agent gets the same offer from 5 different teams. And, you could say, sure, there's collusion there, but you could also just argue they're all using numbers and algorithms that tend to kind of spit out the same thing. So,
yeah, that's one thing with the data that I've noticed, or like that seems obvious in retrospect, but I didn't realize going in, how tricky it is to have permissions, like who views your data. Because even now we have like MLB teams and clients that are getting onboarded to our software platforms, and like Track and Edge, and like, internally we don't worry about what our strength coach can see or our pitching coach can see or R&D can see from a player's data. But for like MLB teams, it's way different. Like players won't want like one whole department of the team to view their data because they don't want to leverage against them in arbitration or whatever, like you said. And it's just crazy. It just seems like from a very broad view, it seems obvious that's like not the most efficient way, right? Like having limited information to different parts of a player development process, where like the idea should be get the player as good as possible because he plays for your team. But instead it's like get the player good, but also don't let him know just how good he is, so he can like use that information against them. And like, he'll keep playing well for your team, but he won't realize his true potential. And then you'll be able to like pay him like relatively peanuts to what he's truly worth.
Well, you'll also see the scenarios where, teams, like a more recent example, Eugenio Suarez, he was, a decent player, went through arbitration, or he went through his first year of arbitration. I remember because I helped argue that case, or when I was at the union. He ended up losing that case, and then they ended up like shortly after, a couple of weeks after, they signed him to an extension. And what kind of happened was the agents, I think they look at it and they're like, oh, sure, yeah, like that's great. They signed him to this extension. It's guaranteed money. And then, of course, fast forward a couple months, and he had this breakout season, and then it seemed like the most team-friendly contract ever.
Yeah.
The teams knew that he was, like they saw the different, whether it was like a changes he made in his swing or, whatever it was, teams saw it. They saw the value, and they were like, hey, we can get him for really cheap right now. We can lock him up because he doesn't realize how good he's going to be. He doesn't see the value yet. And the agents don't see it either. So they don't know. So it's hard for the agent to be like, just hold off like one more year because you're going to have a breakout season and your value is just going to skyrocket. And so teams absolutely take advantage of that. And then, like they might know, if you go in and you ask for, whether in any kind of negotiation, if you say you're worth X, the team might say, no, we think you're worth a lot less. We think you're worth Y. And you might be right, and they might know you're right. But if you can't explain why, like if you don't have any data to back it up, then they're just going to say no. And then you're kind of at a loss because it's just like they're not willing to pay you that. But if you can give them the data that they have that supports that, they're going to be like, all right, like you're right.
That's very interesting. Did your data access change a lot, or was it pretty minimal between when you worked at the MLBPA and where you're at now, or like how did those roles kind of change
with the data that I had access to?
Mm-hmm.
The union really doesn't have anything special. To be honest, I think it's a flaw in like the player side of things. I think that there should be data that they have access to, similar to the data that teams have access to. So there was nothing necessarily special that I had access to at the union. I think I'm able to, do a lot more now that I'm, just on my own for sure.
Do the analysts you guys hire, are those like specifically for Trevor or your agency in general, Luba Sports?
So right now, I essentially contract them, or I contract them. They contract their services to me, but they're a part of the bigger, R&D stuff that Bauer is developing as well on his own.
Okay.
Is there in terms of like arbitration, I guess, in general, player evaluation across the league, is there pretty much similarity within teams of like what is valuable to a player? Are there some teams that like value things differently? Like, do you have to go into, say, like a contract talk or an arbitration differently based on the team? Like knowing, oh, okay, this team really values this metric, this team values this, or is it pretty similar across the board?
I think it depends on the type of negotiation. If we're talking salary arbitration, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's pretty similar across the board. There's the things that matter are the most basic things that you and I would laugh about that were like, wins and losses don't mean shit, but they do in arbitration. Just like, the most important thing, it's like if you're a pitcher, it's, your innings pitched, your ERA, FIP, you could throw in WAR, but if your reference WAR is different than Fangraph, then you can almost just muddy the waters there and say, do we really know what WAR means? No, we don't. Like stupid things like that. So in terms of like arbitration, it's pretty standard, and it's essentially your like grandma and grandpa who don't know baseball. That's who's making the decision. They're labor arbitrators. So if we're talking about arbitration, pretty standard across the board, in free agency and things like that, I think you tend to see, like it changes over the years in terms of what, whether it's, even if it's talking pitching, like whether, the league tends to like, fly ball pitchers versus, ground ball pitchers, things like that change. I think but that changes more across the board. And then there's more, I guess different teams might have different needs and things that they are, that are important to them that they really want. So, you kind of tailor fit it there. But I think in general, it's a little more, team specific when it comes to, a free agent contract.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you think I was going to say, do you think there's like potential for the metrics and stuff used for player value to continue to develop, especially with more technologies coming into the space? Like we've talked a bunch about like Hawkeye this year, potentially like popularizing, biomechanics and whatnot a lot more in the space. Just like the generation of new metrics and valuations, is it the agents and players are more likely to adapt to that quicker and then the league catches up? Or do you think you're just going to operate on what the league values as valuable, I guess?
I think I wouldn't say like the player side, they're not usually the ones in terms of just value, like, valuing what's valuable and what's not. Teams are going to they're going to have the resources to use all the technology and kind of move it forward there. And then I think it tends to be that players then react and they say, okay, so now this is more valuable. Now I focus on this and then I can increase my value. But I think there are players out there who are very in tune with that kind of stuff and are trying to be ahead of the curve. I think, like my client Bauer is obviously a good example of that, who, he's always trying to, use the technology to, kind of get one step ahead of everybody. Because, again, it's like now, I mean, even, several years ago, throwing, 100 was like, wow. And now it's pretty like, especially if you want to come out of the pen, like you better be throwing 100 kind of thing. And now it's shifted more to spin rate or, whatever it is. But, you're always trying to kind of adapt, adjust, use the different technology and kind of be, one step ahead of it.
Yeah.
Speaking of team specific needs or team specific like conversations, and maybe I don't know how much you can talk about this, but like were teams pretty taken aback about how R&D heavy Trevor was when it came to free agency negotiations or portraying his value? And also, was there any consideration or thought to include his media presence as a selling factor? Like not just this guy is, trying his absolute best to keep redesigning his pitches, push like cutting edge R&D stuff into baseball, but also he's also a voice for a lot of people in MLB and has like a growing sort of media channel.
Yeah, so I mean, the two parts to that. The R&D stuff, I would say, was absolutely a selling point for them. They view it as not only are you going to provide value for us, when you take the mound, we totally realize the value that you will add to our organization in terms of just, learning from you. Trevor wants to teach other people. He wants to collaborate. He wants to do all these things. He wants to help other players. I think, while in the beginning of his career, he tended to have this kind of reputation for not being a great clubhouse guy. Most teams, I think, would tell you just flat, outright that that's just not the case. And, when he got traded to Cincinnati, I remember, I think it was Nick Goody, who's one of the relievers there in Cleveland at the time. I think he said in some article or whatever that the biggest winners of that trade were, Sonny Gray and Luis Castillo, and basically like the guys in the rotation in Cincinnati, because Bauer, he adds that much value just being there. Yeah. So in terms of just like his use, like the R&D stuff, I mean, teams loved it. They, were drooling at the idea of getting to add. It's not just a great pitcher, but it's like another great mind who, is going to take their pitching staff to the next level. Yeah. The second part of that, the media. We absolutely used it to, when kind of talking about the value that Bauer adds. There are very few, I think. So I remember with Bryce Harper, I know Boris kind of talked about that, and that was, part of like his value was like he is the face of baseball, right? So he has this added value. Mm-hmm. And you could make that argument, about a handful of players, but I think there are very few players, even like Bryce Harper, who are at the level of Bauer in terms of just the media attention and the popularity that he can bring. I mean, you take a city like Cincinnati, for example. Bauer, I mean, he made fans like across the country, with fans of a whole bunch of different teams. What, right. Yeah. Like interested in Cincinnati and like the Cincinnati Reds. And like, let's be honest, who else normally, I mean, like nice hat. I like the Reds hat, but like most people don't tend to give a crap about. He
bought it for the podcast. He bought that hat for the podcast.
Yeah.
Love it. But that's what, so like he brought attention. He made the Reds in a lot of ways. I'm not going to say like he alone made them relevant, but like he brought a lot of attention to them and just in terms of fans. And so obviously there's teams like, New York, really big markets that don't necessarily need that. But, for smaller markets, that was huge, especially when you have COVID-19, where you've lost a ton of money in terms of just like the, fan attendance and all that stuff. To bring something, this additional kind of value add of popularity, it goes a long way. Any team that signs a big player, though, is, going to get that boost in, kind of fan support.
Yeah. Along those lines of R&D and also media, I'd like to hear from like both aspects. I know you represent some minor leaguers, and obviously they're not going to have the same following that a big leaguer or somebody like Trevor does. But how do you think, what are some, because obviously they're not going to have the same resources as far as R&D and being able to hire analysts and things like that. Are there resources or are there approaches that you've kind of talked to your clients about potentially doing something similar to understand their value better and to kind of grow their career and grow their media presence at all?
Yeah. So with like the minor league guys that I have, usually so I'll have my analysts do like a full deep dive on just where they're at right now. And then, if they've got, so let's say, the first thing aside from if they were offered a contract, an extension, they're going to hit arbitration. So with that in mind, we go through like, what are the big things that are going to increase your value in arbitration? And then what are your underlying, kind of stats that we can work on to improve, to ultimately improve the things that matter in arbitration to improve your value. So obviously things like that, as well as, just using social media as well. I always, preach the importance of it. I understand, like, I have, guys who don't like social media at all, and like, that's fine. But, for so many, they don't truly understand really, like, one, the value, and two, then how to, utilize it in the best way. You can get everything from a lot of my or a lot of players I talk to, like minor league guys, I ask them, like, what does your agent do for you in the minor leagues? Why do you have an agent? And they're like, the most valuable thing that my agent does is they give me free bats or, free cleats or whatever it is.
PB&J sandwiches.
What?
They ship them PB&J sandwiches.
Yeah. But so I look at that and I'm like, okay, well, you don't really need an agent then. Let me tell you what you can do on social media. Get on your social media, start posting things, and I'm going to give you a list of these companies. They're smaller companies, but they make great stuff. They'll send you free stuff. Now you don't need an agent. Like, you get the free stuff, and you're doing that all, through social media, and you're building your brand. And then a lot of it too, I talk to guys about this, is like, you got to realize that, think about, eventually your career is going to end. It could be tomorrow, and it could be in 20 years. You don't know, right? But it's going to end. And then what are you going to do next? And so right now, the best time to, especially, like, I've got a guy, he's thought about going into broadcasting or, something in baseball, but, like media. Then, the best thing he can do right now is grow his, social media so that he's got more of a, presence. And the best time to do that is when you're a, professional athlete. I know minor league, like, you're not in the big leagues yet, but you're still a professional athlete. You still get that blue check mark. Usually they've gotten a little stricter, but like, people don't really know the difference. And if you can throw around and use professional athlete, and that's enough for most people. They're like, oh, wow, and they'll follow you. It's a lot easier to grow. It's a lot easier to, build things when you're still a professional athlete. Once you retire, it's a lot harder.
Yeah. I think that speaks to kind of, both you and Trevor, by the way, are obviously like really good at using social media, I think. And it's kind of funny because, clearly Trevor has this plenty of naysayers as well on Twitter, and I'll see like occasional comments, like people trying to disparage him or just being like, angry Mets fans, just like, you know what, like, I'm glad he didn't go to the Mets, or like, oh, he doesn't even know what he's doing. He's totally tanking his value. And I was like, is he really? Because he just landed the highest average annual salary after essentially like a shortened season. Like, if like people that criticize Trevor, I feel like only adds to his capabilities even off the field, because people will be like, oh, whatever, it was a shortened season. He put up these like crazy stats, but it was a shortened season. And it's like, okay, if that's the case, then, everyone knows it's a shortened season. Doesn't that make it even more impressive that he landed that crazy contract in that with all the supposed like negative stuff on social media? Clearly it's not that negative, because the people that make the decision like don't think so.
The people, well, that's like the biggest thing you just said right there is like the most important like disconnect that I feel like most people don't really realize is like what people on social media think is important versus what the teams talk about, even what the media writes about as being important. As like, usually they're so far off base in the, the teams, they're not going to come out and say anything, but I can tell you like there's a huge disconnect there to begin with. And look, people, they shit on Bauer on like for his use of social media. I get shit on nonstop for my use as an agent on social media. But at the end of the day, I even look at just with my use of social media. First of all, like I created a platform, and essentially like I don't need writers. I use writers sometimes, but I don't need them, right? So I've, kind of bypassed that middleman that everyone said, when everyone was like, you can't be best friends with them, so you're going to have a hard time. Like I just created my own platform, first of all. Second of all, like the amount of passive recruiting that I can do on there, and even just in, like a little over a year that I've had my agency, I'm the most followed agent on like all social media platforms, and like that, there's a lot of value, and the haters are going to be the loudest. They're the ones who shit on it, and they're like, oh, she just wants attention, and it's going to hurt her value, and GMs don't want, like, first of all, GMs don't give a shit. By the way, they also they look at everything that I post, and like they'll tell me like, oh yeah, I saw that thing you posted on Yasser, and like they watch that, and like, hey, that means that like I have just as much influence and ability to get things in front of a GM just as a writer does, right? So I mean, yeah, people that hate it, either they're like they have no clue and they're just out of touch with what actually matters, or they're uncomfortable with it and so they'll shit on it. But there's so much value in whatever. The people that hate on it, the people that hate Bauer and his use of it, that hate my use, they're just people that are still like very uncomfortable with society and like just business and stuff moving forward on like social media platforms.
They don't have any context.
Yeah.
Do you think any of that's going to change after this season with a successful free agency for Bauer and your representation of it?
Like just in terms of people using social media?
Yeah, just like the general feeling around that and what's right and what's wrong. Do you think that maybe more agents are going to use that approach? And or do you think people are going to start being more okay with it after this happens just once is enough? Or I feel like should be enough, but.
Yeah, I think you already I've even kind of seen it where like some agents I see like are starting to be on it a little more and are a little more vocal. And I'm like, that's cool. Like they're also the same ones shitting on me for it, but like and it's the same thing, just where like everyone got upset, and they're mad about, whether it was like Bauer wanting to control the narrative and all that. And then you start seeing shortly after other players who are being the ones to, announce where they're going and not letting the media do it and things like that. They're like, I think it's going to take a long time for people to look back and be like, look, like Bauer was really one of the first to do this, and like look how much he's helped players by doing what he did first. Same thing. I think like it's going to help the agent industry if they get on social media, but I'll always have kind of like that bad rap for it. Maybe later on people will be like, oh, like actually that made sense, but I do think people eventually like they hate on it and then they adopt it.
Do you think like when we just talk like social media platforms, building a following, mainly it's got to be Twitter, right? I know with like Momentum, there's the vlogs and YouTube, probably Instagram as well. But are there any other like major platforms outside of really Twitter or anything that you'd like push hard on, or you could see being valuable from that side?
I guess there's like that, what is it, Clubhouse or something, but I don't. Oh, yeah. I have it. I don't use it. I haven't used it. Maybe that'll be the next thing. I do think, though, Twitter really is. So, like, I have all my different social media platforms have kind of like a different purpose for them. Instagram is like that's kind of where, one of my like big things just in, what I want to do is kind of help change and make things better for, young girls who want to work in sports, and kind of normalizing, being feminine and also working in sports. So like, that's kind of where I use my Instagram for. And it's, showing like that side of me. Twitter is more of where, that's where I put out information. That's, where I interact with the baseball community. And can put out opinions about things. I use, YouTube. I've started to like make different, informational, videos on there to kind of explain and, kind of build more of a reputation as being, someone who's like an expert and understands and can teach certain, insides of the baseball industry that a lot of people don't understand. But so I think there are definitely different purposes of different social media platforms, at least how I use them. I think Twitter is going to always be a really big one. I don't really, I think YouTube would be great. The problem is it's like you need one where people can interact. And I feel like YouTube's really hard for people to really interact. Twitter's the closest that where it's like people can,
right.
You can see them interact on there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was so funny. Like the night Trevor announced he was going to the Dodgers, and then like everyone's like tweeting like, "Oh yeah, he's going to the Mets," and you're just like, two teams still left. It was so funny. It was just like such a good indication of like, why the hell would these reporters know better than you or the client? They're like trying to get you on it. They're trying to like beat you to the punch, and you're just like, nope, two teams still left.
They were wrong so many times with so many things, and then some of the things I couldn't refute necessarily because it would like I had to balance like the integrity of the negotiation with what people were saying, and so like certain things also I realized I'm like, this is just like I don't have time for this shit. Fine, make up bullshit and people will believe it. And I'm sorry, but that one. At that point, I kind of looked at it and felt like this wasn't right to the other team that we were negotiating with. I mean, there was literally a writer who said we had a deal with, with the Mets. And so, I tweeted that out. I think that was like my, best performing tweet ever, just in terms of like engagement and interactions on that one. When I said down to 2. But there was something like they said we had a deadline. We didn't have a deadline. I don't know where that came from, but there's so many just like, false things that were in the media. But also, it made me realize too, there's certain it depends on the team you're negotiating with that because, when, even in the end, it was like, well, things were being leaked when we would talk to the Mets in real time. And people thought it was us too. And I'm like, you guys realize like we're the ones who get mad at the media. Like we're not leaking anything. We're the ones who are annoyed that the media is doing it. But there were teams, like we would talk to them and things were getting out in real time, but like a little skewed or not totally correct in the team's favor usually. But then there were, look, the Dodgers, I mean, most people didn't even really know they were in it until the very end. And no one, if you notice, there weren't any rumors about any of the monetary like dollar figures when it came to the Dodgers. But then on the flip side, like the Mets, that how many different, numbers and different types of contracts did you hear thrown around? Yeah. It depends on the team because like the Dodgers were very, it was all in-house, like tight-lipped, no one was as long, like we weren't saying anything and the team wasn't. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic.
Is that typically how it goes? Like if you're going into a negotiation and there's a lot of discussion and a lot of rumors and a lot of all this about a certain team and then this other team that may be more serious, are the more serious teams that are actually in the more of a hunt for the contract? Are they kind of keeping it on the down low more? Or is that just in this case, in this specific case with Trevor?
It usually depends on the team and what the team's angling for. So like there were certain teams that put out, like we would get off a call. I mean, even the Padres, after we talked to them, they went to the media. They said, we spoke to their agent, like his agents, and we said, keep us informed about anything because they were trying to influence, I believe it was like with the Snell trade. So they had an angle there. So they were, in the media. Certain teams, like they want it to, like they want there to be rumors and stuff because sometimes it's like they're angling for something else, but they think it's going to push another team to jump in, jump in. Everyone's like angling for different things. And
so it's just a big chessboard.
Yeah. And so, I mean, a lot of times it's, the teams that are, using it to angle for different things. But, so it depends. Like there are teams that are very much like very serious in the negotiation that, let the media know. And then there are other teams that are very quiet and more of like the dark horse in it.
That makes sense. We actually got a couple questions in the chat in the live stream. There might be some that you can't touch on, but one of the first ones was how Yasser Puig's free agency compared to Bauer's from the agent side, both in terms of like demand and openness to the public. And, and then the follow-up second question is, and when is he signing with the Nationals? So the first question mainly.
His is obviously it's very different. I got him, I signed him the end of last year. Obviously he didn't have a job the following year, for a variety of reasons, with his other representation. So, going into it, it was a little bit tougher. It wasn't definitely a very different process than representing, Bauer. But, we're currently, he's still, training and staying in shape and ready. It's kind of a shitty, environment with COVID, and what happened with a lot of teams where they, there are very few teams that are really going for it, especially because one, we don't have the universal DH, and then two, we don't have expanded playoffs this year. So because of that, a lot of teams, instead of having, more than 50% make it to the playoffs, you're going to have the normal amount, which means that a lot of teams are looking at it and they're saying, look, we really don't have that good of a chance to make it that deep. So instead of spending a lot of money and trying to win, we got hit pretty hard, everyone did last year with, COVID-19. So let's just give our rookies, and our young guys and the prospects, at bats and things like that. And this year's a wash. And that's what a lot of teams are kind of, doing. So, a player like Yasiel, it's a lot harder, because, he's a veteran guy. And while normally that would carry a lot of value, this year, a lot of teams, like, the value is in just giving at bats to the young guys, and more of like throwaway at bats in a sense. So, especially
coming off a year that's probably filled with a lot of player development, right? A lot of those young guys maybe got more physical and skill changes, and since with the basically minimize minor leagues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. And then no comment on when he's going to sign with the Nationals.
No comment on that one.
Okay, that's fair. The other question was wrestler was actually asking, former guest on the podcast last episode actually, tools or I guess anything specific you do to like build more of a following on social media, and then related, what technologies would you kind of recommend for minor leaguers? I guess, is there anything they could kind of get themselves to maybe help, understand their value, their own development as they're going?
And Mike Ressler, CTO of Diamond Kinetics. So, technology to consider as well, I'm sure, from his point of view.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the technology like that's available, whether it's you're focusing on hitting or, pitching, there's a ton out there, and, a ton you can do. I think, some of, the best things you can do are, focus on, going to a place in the off season like Driveline or, something like that, where, you can actually, you focus on whatever kind of weapons that you can develop to make you valuable. Also going to your team sometimes and asking, say, hey, what would I have to do in order to be a big leaguer? What do you need to see in me? Because a lot of times like guys don't even know the answer to that. Because that's such an important question to ask. Like, hey, what changes could I make that would, in your eyes, make me like, all right, like that there's someone worthy of bringing up to the big leagues? Because sometimes it's not what they think it is, someone, and then now you have like an actual, tangible thing or, something that that I got to work on, because if I work on this, if I can improve this, then, that's going to help me. Instead of a lot of players just sit there and they just wonder and they're like, I don't know what else I can do to get called up. Sometimes just go in and ask, say, what can I do? What would it take? In terms of like a social media following and, what to do there, a lot of it is one, just post, be active on there. That's like sometimes the hardest thing. I mean, when I look at guys' accounts, I mean, if you have it's middle of March now, I mean, if you've got 3 or 4 posts, on Instagram or tweets, from since the beginning of the year, like do more. Like you got to do more.
Yeah.
And find something that you are passionate about, whether and engage in that, on that, and put stuff out there about that. It doesn't have to be, especially like for players, it doesn't have to be baseball, specific. Whatever hobbies you might have, put that out, like engage in that kind of stuff. And people that, especially like fans who relate to that, whether if you like fishing or hunting or, whatever it is, like they're going to be drawn to you and they're going to want to follow you. But, a lot of it is just actually engaging, posting, and being active on there.
And Rachel, I know you got to go soon, probably in a couple minutes, if not now. But I was going to ask you, kind of loop into, the own competing podcast you run of Jessica Kleinschmidt. How has that been going? And what kind of wine do you recommend when I come on as a guest?
Yeah, I know we are going to have you on, huh? Even though I think it was this podcast copied ours, right?
No way. When was you guys' first episode? I could have sworn we were first.
During quarantine.
Oh yeah, we were way before quarantine. We were a whole 2 months before quarantine.
We weren't way before quarantine.
Yeah,
we were early February last year, because our first few episodes were before lockdown. So yeah,
it was on Valentine's Day.
I think we got 3 episodes in before we had to quarantine, and then it was all downhill from there.
Gotcha.
Fully remote.
Well, now remember when you thought, Caravan, that this podcast had better hair than the Corked Up podcast? I think you single-handedly ruined it for your podcast.
Okay, so I'll be on the podcast in 2 years.
Yes.
I can read between the lines.
When your hair is as beautiful as mine and Jess Kleinschmidt's, hers is way better than mine, then you can be on our podcast. I'm kidding though. You can come on, but just know, we're totally going to show you up when it comes to our hair.
Oh man.
I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I've been showing everyone up for the last couple of years. Yeah. I'm looking to be, not pulling my weight on the hair thing for once in a while.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I was pretty excited to have you on, and with the luscious locks that you had.
Oh, I still have the hair. I still have the hair.
Yeah.
I still have the hair. I haven't gotten rid of it. I put it in an envelope and I was going to give it to Kyle Bodie, but I forgot to give it to him. I was in Arizona for a couple of days, but I have it with me at Driveline. So, we can figure something out.
Something admirable, you were going to donate it to, Locks of Love or one of those.
No, he was just going to give it by hand to Bodie.
Weird, handed to somebody. Got it.
I'm going to donate it to Corked Up.
That's even worse. That's even worse.
What's your favorite wine, though? I just went to Sonoma this weekend to go wine tasting. I'm very curious.
Did you? Ooh,
yeah,
I love
incredible.
I'm a big Pinot or I do love Merlot. But I had a really good. It was from Santa Barbara. I was in Santa Barbara this weekend. It was a local Santa Barbara Pinot that was fantastic. But I'm definitely more of a red wine person. Although Jess and I have learned that when we drink red wine, our on the podcast, especially because we're recording, our teeth get all red and dark. And so we usually, do a lighter, a white wine. But I do like red wine.
Yeah, I actually learned everything I know about wine in the last couple of weeks. I went wine tasting twice with my friend who's into wine.
And now you're like a sommelier now.
Yeah. I just learned what a Malbec is.
Okay.
I still don't know what that is.
Yeah, actually, also when I said it, I actually don't know if I know what it is. I said it, and now I don't know if I actually know what a Malbec is. I just remember that being a thing. I was like, oh, that's right. I keep hearing that. That is a wine. Yeah, Malbec.
I'll be honest with you though. I'm not a big. I grew up in the wine area too, in Carmel Valley.
Yeah.
And near Sonoma. But I'm not a huge wine snob. And I always get when I go to restaurants and they pour and they want you to taste it, and I'm I don't know what they want me to say.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be this isn't good enough. I'm not that picky. I probably should learn wines a little better. But I usually am with someone else who's like, a wine snob. And so I just let them handle it.
Yeah. I was going to say, I bet otherwise you just go, yeah, give me the house red.
Yeah. I'm just, I just choose one of them. I have the one person who's like probably worse than me, would be like I've seen when Bauer has to order a wine and he has no fucking clue.
Oh, yeah.
Like he doesn't drink. And so he'll get swindled into like buying the nicest bottle because he'll just like ask them and they're like, well, you really should go with this one. And it's usually the most expensive one on there. And he's like, all right. And usually, it's not, you can't tell the difference between, like house, like the cheapest one and then the most expensive. But, because he's, has no clue and they can like smell that, they're like, oh, get this dude to buy the most expensive one.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah. And thanks for having me, guys. Sorry I have to bounce quickly, but I appreciate you guys having me on. You'll have to teach Jess and I how you do this live thing. That's kind of cool.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean,
no, just feel free to pay us some royalties when your guys' podcast blows up,
No,
or
she- I mean, she already did
Puig's
by-
agency contract.
they already did by giving us the go to Driveline in the off season. The
Yeah.
Driveline endorsement there. That's $100 million
The
endorsement.
plug.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like, what more do you want?
Yeah. So yeah, any
Let's
tips
tear
on
back is what he wants.
any tips on setting up live? I mean, yeah, definitely down.
Well, we'll have to have you guys on. We'll have all you guys. We'll do like a Driveline porked up collab.
Let's go. I'm
Maybe-
sorry.
What?
I brought some nice Pinot Noirs from Sonoma. I'll have one of those on the
Lindley's
podcast.
ready.
Oh yeah.
There you go. Okay, save it for our pod, and
Yeah.
we'll pop that bottle.
That's
And I'll be saving my hair for the pod too. So.
Just please give that to Kyle and be done with it, or donate it. One of the two.
Or just be done with it. Just be done. Just be done with it. Period.
Yes.
If he gives it to Kyle, it won't be done with for a very long time. Kyle will keep
I
that
have a
alive.
feeling, that's the case.
Yeah.
But yikes! Well, I'm glad I can see your beautiful face now, Alex. And
That's a
Yeah.
perfect way to end this. Perfect way to
I've been getting that a lot. Getting that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Well,
Please.
See you
All right.
guys.
yeah, appreciate it. Have a good
Yeah.
one.
You as well. Thanks
Thanks,
for coming
Reach.
on again. See ya.
Of course. Have a good one.